Okay, legends, welcome back to the channel with another Overlord Lord of Nazarick video. Now, we're gonna talk about Narberal. She's dropped in the game as an SR version of her. Similar to Nabe, she's the same character, but she's on the made one, the different version of her, and she's the lesser version of her. We're gonna be talking about her. She's dropped with Aura on the same banner. So if we're gonna go and check the banner, we're gonna see her in the SR with the rate up for 3.6 almost. So you can go and actually have her. Also Kajit, also you have Entoma having the rate up on this banner. Now we're gonna talk about her and showcase her, everything about her, and talk specifically. She has a different type of utility of playing. We'll be talking about that and I'll explain everything about it so you'd understand what's going on with Narberal. Okay, first of all, she has a captain skill, which is absolutely perfect, and it's one of the good skills. If you want to play her for the captain skill for magical damage, I would absolutely tell you that this is a good option. So enemies with shock have their magical defense reduced by 30%. It does apply for everything for magical defense, but you need to apply shock. So she does apply shock with her passive. We'll be talking, or with her Arclight when she has her Arclight, we'll be talking about that and tell you how she inflicts shock on everybody, and then you can abuse magical damage. So anybody that has magical damage, actually as a captain, she will buff all their magical damages. This is one of the great actually captain skills if you have a synergy with magical damage, not shock. Shock, she can be the only shocker on your team, and everything else magical damage, and you will reduce their defense by 30%. So you need to keep that in mind. Now let's talk about her passive. And her passive will show you that she's, or with her skill, that she's a stripper. Now, not that kind of a stripper that's in your head. She's a stripper, it means she strips buffs from enemies. We'll be talking about that as well. So, when Nabe hits a target that is inflicted with shock, her turn meter boosts by 2%, goes up to 6% at level 4, which is good, which make her rotation even faster and make her go, because she doesn't lack speed. She lacks speed, she doesn't have speed, so this will make her actually go more and more and deal more damages, which is really great. So when she hits a target inflicted with shock, so you need to pre-inflict them with shock so she can hit them and then gain the turn meter, which is a little bit of a disadvantage. If she hits targets, inflict shock, and if she inflicts shock on them, she gets turn meter, I will say it might be more consistent, but with her Arclight, this will be consistent. I'll be explaining why. When Nabe hits the target inflicted with shock, has a 60% fixed chance to dispel one buff from the target. So she's a dispeller, she's a stripper, she strips buffs from the enemies and take them away from them with a 60% chance or fixed chance, which you can't counter with ER. So the probability is solely based on this skill, unaffected by EP or ER. You don't need to build her on EP or on ER for that to happen. And on level 5, it's a 100% fixed chance, so she will immediately always strip them from one buff that they have, and this will help a lot. Now this great against, in the future, invincibility teams with invulnerability, or right now if they're using somebody like Pandora's active that will give immortality or invincibility or invulnerability to a character, she can go and hit them, and if they have only that buff on them, she can strip it away and then they can take damage, this is the good use of her. The mechanic of dispelling is really great, but they need to have shock on them, and we're gonna show you how she can be consistent with that. Now, straightforward, single target, her first skill, nothing special. She deals magical damage. Her skills are magical damage that goes well with her captain passive or the leader passive. So up to 100% in total in attack of her attack deals magical damage to a single unit. Now her second skill, which is actually decent, it's not that bad. So deals magical damage equal to 100% of attack only on a single target. Hitting grant 100 base chance to inflict shock on the target. Base chance at 100%. It means you can counter it with ER. If she has high EP, if you build her on EP, this will increase the chances. I wouldn't recommend going on EP if you want to build her. Build her with HP, defense, speed, and attack. That would help her a little bit, and magical defense. You want the stats for her survivability so she can stay on the battlefield more and more. Now, if you get her to 5-star, she will gain attack boost that lasts 2 rounds every time she inflicts the lightning or she goes and attack with her second skill. The attack boost will give her 30% of attack. It's 30%? Yes, 30%, which is really great. Now, on level 2, if the target already inflicted with shock hits a random enemy preferably without shock, with lightning. With lightning, which means the second skill. So if she attacks somebody with shock, she attacks another person that does not have a shock, also with lightning, dealing 100% and goes up to 120% of attack with her spell. And it will most likely land a shock on them, because hitting with lightning will give you a 100 base chance to inflict shock for 2 rounds, which is good for shock teams to be more consistent with this and hits multiple enemies. The cooldown goes at level 5 for -1. It means every round now and then you can do that. So you can play other characters that boost turn meter and give her more attack, or more rounds to go, or on the same round to go again, or give her a reduction in the cooldown of the skill, so she can go and do this and apply it again, which is great. Now, her ultimate Chain Dragon Lightning, which is great actually. So it's an AoE skill that hits all the enemies and deals magical damage equal to 100% for all of them, and shock on all enemies lasts 1 more round. So she extends the shock duration, which will help her be a good unit for shock synergy. It's highly recommended to play with shock teams. So at 4 stars, using the skill unleashes lightning blast. We'll talk about what it is. If any target is inflicted with shock, so if she inflicts them with shock, she unleashes lightning blast. Lightning Blast deals magical damage equal to the number of stacks of shock on all the enemies, multiplied by 20% of attack. So if you have one shock on the enemies, she will hit them with 20% of her attack to all of the enemies. If there's one enemy with shock, if all the enemies have shock, like 4 stacks, then 4 times 20%, which is huge. Now, if they have 2 shock, there's 4 characters with 2 shock, 2 stacks, everybody. So it means that's 8. 2 by 4, that's 8. 8 by 20, which will make it a huge number actually based on her attack. This is what's good about her. What's good about her is the 6 star we'll be talking about. And this is why you want some attack on her. So it will be more and more, because at 6 stars, it's multiplied by 30% of attack. So if they have 2 stacks, everybody, so that's 8 times 30% of attack on everybody, which will make it a huge difference in the damage dealing. But you need to keep her alive so she can do that. Her ultimate is one of the great ultimate for bursting in the entire game, so keep that in mind. But the downside of this AoE skill, that it does not inflict shock. It will capitalize on the units that they have shock on them, so you need somebody to inflict shock, or she to inflict shock. I'll be talking about how good this spell is. At the start of the battle, you wanna go and have her Arclight on her, and then immediately hit with her ultimate so she can deal as much damage as possible. This is how bursty she is. So increases the magical damage to 130%. Now, I'm talking about you need her Arclight, you need her Arclight, you need her Arclight. It's so crucial if you wanna build this character. You need her Arclight to be on her, because her Arclight is everything for her. So, the Arclight, the EX effect, and it gives her more attack, which is great. Advantage, which means at the start of the battle, immediately when you go into the battle, it will happen. Randomly uses lightning on enemies, on all enemies, increasing damage to those with shock by 10%. Now, what does the lightning do? As we said before, the lightning here, it's dealing magical damage and 100 basic chance to inflict shock. So immediately she starts the battle, she hit them with lightning, everybody. She will inflict shock if they don't have shock already. Now, some units in the battle also, when you start the battle, they inflict shock immediately. If they have shock, it will increase the damage dealt to these enemies with the shock by 10%, and it goes up to 30%, which is great. This is why you need her EX on her. You can't play her without her EX. You want to be consistent and inflict shock, especially if you're playing a full lineup that goes and bursts teams immediately with shock. You want her to drop on the battle, hit everybody with shock. That's her passive with her Arclight. Everybody has shock. Now, if you have Aura, and you can start with Aura, you can go and start with Aura, the Ego Aura, the Lightning Aura, and inflict damages to everybody that has shock immediately with her ultimate, and wipe clean the entire roster, or at least the 3 characters beside each other, which is perfect combo and synergy. Now, the general effect, we have it. It's a good general effect. I wouldn't recommend playing this card on anybody else, actually, the general effect, because we have a better one. I'll be talking about it. Increasing the AoE damage dealt by the skill by 4.5, and extra 2% damage for 4 more, if there is 4 more targets. And of course, it max out at 9% and 4%, which if you want the same effect on a general character, on somebody as characters in the shop, you're gonna go and check that we have in the exchange cards that do similar. So if you're gonna go and exchange it to a character actually with their Arclight, you have somebody like Demiurge with his increase AoE damage by 6.5. That's only on 1 star, and 3.5, and if you max it, it does more. But the best one is to go with this one, which is target found. It will immediately increase it by 8% and extra 4%, which is when you max it on her, you're gonna get these numbers. This is at only 1 star, so 1 copy of this will do you justice. And if you increase it even more, you're gonna get 16% by 8%, which is absolutely fantastic. And this is what I would recommend if you want to use the card for her for just the AoE or something specific like that. You can go and use this one. We get also one for free, I guess, for Albedo, which we all have, I think. That deals the same thing, 6.5 and extra 3.5, which will make it more consistent on your AoE targets. Now, is she a good unit? Yes, she's a good unit. Is she a bursty unit? She is a bursty unit. Does she, you recommend her to play on a shock team? Yes, of course, but have her Arclight with her. You need her Arclight. Your shock team will be absolutely great with her. But because the shock meta or the shock team is very lacking in speed and in defense and magical defense, you need these characters that are tanky and surviving to protect them, such as a big tank that have a big shield, or something like Armored Albedo that at 6 stars she gets everybody shields at the start of the battle, so she would protect them a little bit. And if you're having somebody like PDL and Albedo is 6 stars and you have 1 copy of PDL and she gives him shield at the start of the battle, because he has shield he will support, so any unit that will be targeted he will go and tank instead for you. That would make it awesome and give you the time for you to ramp up the damages or go to have a turn at least to cast your spells. This is basically what is Narberal all about. I don't know, in the anime, Narberal, the maid one, has she's considered as the superior unit to the Nabe Adventurer, which is the one that is the other one with the cape that goes with Momon, because the other one is considered inferior, and when Narberal actually comes into play, she's the one that is most likely to be OP. But in the game they made her as an SR, which is, it's okay, it's a game, you know, it does not go 100% one-to-one with the lore. And yeah, that was it for the video. I'll be seeing you in the next one.